You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 194. On today's show, we chat with costume designer Elsa Hiltner about the lack of pay equity in theatrical design and what Elsa is doing about it. We discuss living wage, the pay equity standards, the theatrical designer pay resource, and annual income for Chicago-based non-union costume designers. Before we get started, I do want to mention that we recorded this 3 months ago. Elsa mentions ICE immigration raids. Now, at the time, the National Guard had been deployed in Chicago in the guise of protecting the immigration facilities. Now, the ICE raids are still terrorizing the nation, but as of 5 days ago, when we started 2026, the National Guard has been pulled out of Chicago. But of course, the current news is that the Trump administration just kidnapped the president of Venezuela, and Trump is now claiming that he is going to be running that government. So for everybody listening in the future, hopefully Venezuela has returned to governing itself. But right now, it is just a bizarre time to be living in the United States because the government is just acting erratically and ignoring both national and international law. But on a lighter note, I suppose, let me mention that the Kennedy Center was renamed the Trump Kennedy Center. Now, this is not a political podcast, but it just seems wrong not to mention that because there's incredible performing arts that go on at that institution, and it's in our nation's capital. A quick recap of how that came to be, which was in February of 2025, Trump appointed himself chairman of the Kennedy Center. Now, that led to fallout of resignations, of firings. There was cancellations of artists, and then there was cancellations by the artists themselves. And then the dust sort of settled on that a little bit. And then the board decided to rename that arts institution after the aggressor who took it over, which that has caused more fallout. And this time it is mostly artists that are canceling their engagements. So I mentioned this on today's show because it's, again, a bizarre thing to witness, because anybody listening in the future, I'm hoping that the name has been restored to just the Kennedy Center and that politicians are worrying about people's well-being and things like that and not putting themselves in roles dictating the correct kind of art. But enough about that. All I really wanted to say is that right now the truth is stranger than fiction. Okay, one last thing before we get started, because I don't want to keep us too long because Elsa's interview is incredible. All right, you'll notice that there was a 6-month gap between our last episode and this one. Now, there is no reason for that other than my body just demanded more sleep. I'll explain more about that at the end of the episode, but what I want to say now is thank you to the Patreon patrons who stuck with me through it all 28 of you, because thanks to you, the feed and the website are still live and paid for. And during our 6 months away, we had 8,000 new downloads. So thank you to you OG patrons. And if you are a new listener, welcome. I am so glad you're here because we are going to continue these honest conversations about the business side of our careers. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel. We are recording this October 17th, 2025. There is a government shutdown in the USA, and that is now in day 17. I don't think it's impacting me personally because I don't work for the government, but man, what a wild time to be alive, I guess. And that looks to be going on for another week or so, which is just bizarre that we can do that. But anyway, that aside, today on the show, we are welcoming Elsa Hiltner. So Elsa, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Elsa, where are you based, and is there any news going on there that we should know about?
Oh, well, I'm in Chicago, so yes. just like the last month and a half has been a pretty terrible time in Chicago, honestly. ICE was in my neighborhood on Tuesday. Obviously lots of protests happening and makes it very hard to focus on anything else when that is, happening locally.
Yeah. All right. Um, about you and your life and your career, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be an artist. I really liked, creating things, seeing what other people created. I found people very interesting, just socially and psychologically, I guess. And so theater felt like a good merging of people and art. I was also very always interested in like social justice issues, equity issues, access to resources. As a kid, I did a lot of activism in high school, mostly around homelessness and access to resources, including clothing. I was a costume designer, and so there was a little natural fit between those two topics. So, yeah, kind of figured I'd try to be a working artist and see if I could make that work as a career. And if it didn't work out, I'd probably turn to, another very lucrative space in social justice work, right? I mean, both of these areas pay very well. But that was kind of my thought, leaving high school and going into a theater program, that I'd, try this first. I feel like I've merged both of those interests pretty thoroughly throughout the artistic work that I've done, and then the kind of activism work that I've done. So yeah.
Well, and today we're talking because I want to talk about the activist work just because you're covering so much on pay equity, which is, I don't know if it's a hot button topic in theater, but it's a thing that needs addressing in theater. So that's why you're here. So I'm interested in, and that's going to be my questions that I'm asking you. But you were saying in high school being a costume designer. So I got into lighting in college. When did you get into costuming?
So I went to Shorewood High School in Shorewood, Wisconsin, which had a full theater department. And I was able to take courses in theater tech, in costume design and construction, like when I was in high school, along with, folks could take acting and, vocal stuff if they were interested in that. And so we had a very, very robust just school. A lot of the, when they take Broadway productions and make them, easier for high school voices, Shorewood was often one of the first schools to get like the new trial run of Broadway shows. And so it was, we were both learning skills, but also really treated like working professionals in many ways. So I loved it, for obvious reasons. I think people who do theater understand that, and so when I was, leaving school, I knew that I wanted to, pursue that.
Amazing. And then today, I won't age you necessarily, but years on into your life, how much of your life is costuming versus social justice, or what's the balance you
Oh,
have?
man. Well, the pay equity activism really pushed me out of costume design. I haven't designed a show since 2019. I think, the pandemic definitely sealed the deal. The first essay I wrote came out in maybe fall of 2016, I think it was. And in 2016, I think I was designing 12 or 14 shows. That was kind of my normal year as a, full-time freelance costume designer. And in 2017, I went down to 7 shows for that year, and it just kept going down from there. And I chalk it up to a combination of takes a choice to hire somebody who's going to ask pointed questions about compensation and talk to people about labor conditions. And, I definitely knew who the theaters were who were willing to have those conversations openly and supportively. I kept working with them. And I think problematically, people thought of me more as an activist than as a designer as I started doing more of that work. And so it just felt less natural to hire me as a costume designer. And then also, I was less willing to take shows that I had been willing to take before. And so, I just wasn't willing to, work for pennies or a few $100s or whatever it was. I asked a lot more questions before before I agreed to things. And so, um, between all those factors, it really reduced the number of shows that I worked on. And it just kept going on until I think 2019, I had 2 shows or something like this. So, yeah.
And then, just forgive me for asking these questions, but how do you make a living doing what you do? Like, who pays you?
So I have a day job. Um, but I guess just to back up, right? Like, if you lose like half of your work in the course of a few months as a freelancer, like that's a very serious problem. Um, and at the time, my son, I think, was 4 or something like this, and my husband was in grad school, so it was not an ideal time to, and also like in a good year, I was making $25,000, right? So it's not like there was any kind of safety net or any of that. Um, so I asked a theater company that I worked with a lot, that I was a company member of, Collaboraction, Action, if they had some like pickup work that I could do so I could like make some money. And they hired me to plan the benefit. And then that kind of grew into doing some marketing and other development work. And then that grew into, I did, worked with them for 5 years, and I became director of development with them. Um, and then in 2022, I kind of switched careers, left theater, and work for a legal service organization that supports artists in Illinois. And so I do educational programs, kind of the go between the attorneys and the arts community as far as what do artists need to know about their legal rights.
Wonderful. And I love you finding that because it seems like a perfect fit for you. But is that like a 9 to 5, 40-hour type thing?
Yep.
And then all this advocacy that's on your website, is that separate from that?
Yes, completely separate. Yep. Yeah.
Oh man, okay. Because the only link I'm going to have in the show notes today is your website. And the reason for that is because it is well organized and you have links to all the things that we're going to discuss. I also want to go back and say thank you for saying that I was making $25,000 in a good year, because you also paired that with saying you did 12 to 14 shows a year,
Yeah.
which means that each of those shows is on average paying $2,000 roughly.
Right. And most of them were not paying $2,000. I did shows, I think, my average fee, and this was in, the 20 teens, right? So uh, you would expect with inflation things would be higher now, but who knows? Um, I think 800 to 1600 was pretty typical for me. I was never in the union. I could not afford to join the union, and so I made non-union rates. Um, but then I also did wardrobe styling for commercials, and that pays much better. I get paid uh, $800 a day, I think was my day rate, and day rate for shopping and returning and everything like that. And so, um, I think in 2019, I did a big shoot that was 2 weeks long, right? And I made like $13,000 in like 2 weeks. So, it's like averaging like that, right? But,
Yeah, that gig paid for the rest of your
exactly.
year.
Yes. Subsidized it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm just so glad we're talking about that, and that you said you're not in the union. And also, just to clarify, you've been Chicago based your whole career.
Pretty much, yeah. I went to school in Washington State. I worked in Seattle for a year after graduating, and did full-time freelance costume design out there. But that was, 2007, 2006. And so I've been here since 2007.
Okay. Because I zoomed into a NYU class last week to talk about finances and these things. And there was 2 other faculty members present who are both Broadway designers. And as part of my presentation, I say, hey, I have never been paid more than $6,000 for a design. Like that was the top number I've ever made. And they both sort of jumped in and were like, well, you can make more than that. We've made more than that.
Yeah, for like the 20 people.
And I felt really like embarrassed about it. Because I was like, here, I'm the one that's like leading the presentation. And yet I apparently am the one that makes the least amount of money.
It's important to know that, though. I mean, we sell this industry with the bright lights and the big names and the success, your name in the newspaper however many times, right? And like, I had no idea that this is what I was supposed to expect when I went to college for this. I don't, I probably would have done it anyhow because I was stubborn, but, I had no idea. And people didn't talk about it. So I think it's, yeah, super important.
And people still don't talk about it, but also like there's more information accessible, like your website, for example. So there's more information about it. But I will say, like for myself, people told me it wasn't going to pay well.
Hmm.
I still did it thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, but there's a weird like, and I feel like that ties into shame a little bit, where like we don't want to talk about it because in my brain, I'm like, well, I was warned, I was told this was how it, was going to be,
Sure.
and
Hmm.
that if I wanted to make money, I had to go like a different route, or like become a technician, or do all like there's a lot of ways that you can make money in the industry, but not necessarily as a lighting designer for theater.
Yeah, I mean, that is like a huge story we tell ourselves, and I think there are so many stories that we tell ourselves and that the industry tells ourselves, like, that are designed to exploit people. I think it's, um, there's no reason that it has to be this way. We've just decided that that's okay and that people are willing to put up with it, and then we tell these stories to make it, like, romantic to be a starving artist or whatever it is. And I think, I am often frustrated that artists who are some of the most imaginative people out there cannot, like, figure out how to imagine a different system to work within. Um, and I this is a little bit of a tangent, but, like, right now, we're going through this terrible time as a country. We have, all sorts of, increasing prices, stress of the job market, stress of, like, social, community stuff. And it makes people really protective of what they currently have and puts a lot of fear into people of, like, trying to get something better. And I have seen just in the last few months, like, a shift in, um, like, how people talk about, labor issues in the arts that, like, there was this whole conversation online, a few months ago that was like, well, like, if people wanna work for low pay, that's okay, like, they get to decide that, right? If you can afford to take that, that low paying gig, like, nobody should shame you for that. And, you know, I feel personally that if I take those low paying gigs, I am making it okay for that to happen. And then I'm making it so that people who cannot afford, in quotes, to take those gigs, just don't have the opportunity to do this. And I just think it's we need to, especially right now, I think always, but especially right now when things are so stressful, to like remember that we can build something better, that we do not have to only protect what we have and not envision like something greater for everybody because it's also a really good time to build something new when there's like all of this chaos, right?
Yeah. And connected or layered on is I just took this teaching job. So I think people listening don't necessarily know that I'm a professor again. But I'm a professor now at Webster University in St. Louis, which is a small private school. And it's something I've not been around, but the student body seems to be more affluent. And so it's weird because the previous place I taught accepted anybody, it was a state school. The means was not there for the students, and that made in teaching, I had to make a lot of decisions about like, let's not require textbooks. Let me try to provide the supplies when I can, or let me think about the assignments that aren't going to be taxing financially on people. At this university I'm at, the students, not all of them, but several of them seem to have the means to, if they need to buy Lightright, or if they need to buy Vectorworks, or put out money to go do an internship or somewhere. And it's weird because it changes how I teach. Like, I don't have to worry about teaching. I can really just teach lighting. But and these students are gonna have careers, but it's not because that I'm teaching them so well.
Yeah.
It's because I think several of them will have the means to sustain the career and take the low-paying internships or the low-paying jobs or weather periods of not having gigs, but it has nothing to do with the industry or the pay in the industry. It's more about their personal, like, level of comfort or privilege, and I'm happy for all of them. I'm thrilled to be teaching there. I love it. The students are wonderful, but that is something I'm noticing. I'm not sure how to teach it because it's like, well, some of these lessons about finance, I don't think my students need because they just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a saying that I really love that talent is more common than opportunity, and it really speaks to, the people who can afford to take those opportunities, right, are the ones who get to showcase their talent first off, and then also, develop it further, and then we'll have access to those additional opportunities. Um, and I think that I mean, I'm a white woman, able-bodied, cisgender, straight, right? And I take the privilege that comes with that very seriously. And I don't want to enable a system to exploit anybody. Like I, I can barely afford to take those, the $600 paying gigs that I was doing. Right? I kind of made it work for at least a little bit. um, but me taking those made that an okay rate to offer, right? It was like, people are willing to take this rate. This is the market value of this work. Um, and, for folks who, wanted to have kids or, didn't have a spouse that was making money too, right? Like that is not something you can do. Um, and so as much as we can teach the next generation of artists to think in those terms that it's not just about you and your um, desire to be an artist. It's you're part of the system and the community, and you have there's just responsibility that should come with that.
Yeah, I think that being part of a community is very important because all these financial decisions get made individually, like, except for the
Yes.
union, except for, like, on our team that are sort of pushing and, like, asking on a larger scale with larger amounts of people. All the decisions, like whether you're gonna take this fee or what your budget is for the project, those are all individuals, and it takes so much energy to fight for yourself. So, I think the communal aspect of knowing that this is an industry and we all have to keep doing the work, I think that's sort of the most important thing to instill is that, like, you can't just say, "Okay, I'm okay. It's cool." But it's like, no, we all we all have to do this.
And it's hard in design too, because if you're not in the union, you don't work with other designers of your same discipline hardly ever. Maybe if you're assisting somebody or somebody's assisting you, but um, it really makes for that, cottage industry, pre-industrialization, right? Where it's easy to exploit people who weren't in community. And then as soon as they end up in the factory together and they're all on the same floor, they can match notes about working conditions and decide to work together. And so I think, I mean, obviously, unionization is so important and having that community there, but um, it's really important to find it in other ways too. And I think, in many ways, the internet has really helped with that. Um, but it's good to match notes.
Well, and I have dreams that the union will eventually go away because as a society and as an industry, we will do better and be better. And then if there's things that people have access to, like healthcare, then that's one thing the union doesn't need to help. And if people have access to things like retirement accounts, then that's one less thing the union has to deal with. So I know this is a dream. I know.
Yeah, no, it's a stopgap for a terrible system. Capitalism, right? I mean, that's the root of all evil.
And I am in the union, but I do want to talk about that because I took the exam. There's a less expensive way in the Eastern region to go in if you take the exam. And Anyway, so I joined, but I didn't use the union contracts as much. So like when I was on that NYU panel, it's like those other two people were like, oh yeah, we've done LORT shows and these shows and union shows. And I've done a bunch of like non-union work, even though I've been a part of the union. In a way, if I were to go back in time, would I join? Not necessarily. Because I don't think that it has benefited me enough. And that's partially my fault. I take responsibility for that. But I also do want to say that even though the union does a lot of good work for its members, there are committees and there are people that are part of the union that are like you going above and beyond, because even when you're in the union, you're working individually. Like the contracts are all individual. You don't really work with other designers, or you do, but you don't spend that much time together because you're all working. And so there are a bunch of people on committees and negotiations that take months and years. And these people do that in addition to their regular work because they know how important it is for the union to have these discussions and have these group meetings. And so I just want to say to the people that take that extra step and do that extra work for the union, good for you guys.
Yeah. No, it's amazing work, and it impacts, even us who aren't in the union too. So it's super important.
All right, one little detour here. A couple questions I just wanted to ask you before we get back into this, which is, what is a live event that you like to experience as an audience member, or perhaps a piece of art that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I personally have been going to see more live music post-pandemic. It's not something I did all that often before the pandemic. I think for a variety of reasons, I make more money now, and so I can afford to buy tickets is one of the main things, and babysitter and all the rest that goes with that. I think communal art experiences are incredibly important and just feel really good in general. And the first theater production I went to after the pandemic, so not having been in a communal art experience with folks, um, was just, you could feel everybody feeling things together and and that feeling good to everybody around you. And it just has made me think about the importance, the power of theater, the importance of experiencing art with other folks in a different way. Um, but yeah, I mean, I really like going to the art museum. I find it very relaxing. I tend to like to wander and stumble upon something amazing. But live music has been the thing that I've been doing most.
That's awesome. All right, so all my students just went over to Kansas City to see Chapel Roan. That was a concert. What are the concerts that you go to?
Okay, so my absolutely favorite artist is Dessa, and going, every year when she comes to Chicago, I go. So that's in December. I am very excited for that. Um, and then, I like going to the free shows in Millennium Park in Chicago. I went and saw Angelique Kidjo and Yo-Yo Ma play together, which was just the most incredible experience. I took my kids. I mean, it blew their minds in all the best ways. Um, and just, being with all of Chicago on that lawn for a free show, felt really good.
That's awesome. All right, and then you've mentioned kids. So when you go to a concert now, do you have to get a babysitter?
Mostly. My son's 13, so he's almost old enough to take care of my daughter too. Um, but yeah, or I take them along, right? Like if it's a thing I can take them to. My kids grew up getting dragged to tech at all hours of the day and night. So they're pretty down to see art that might not be designed for them. But yeah, we do a babysitter when we need to.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, because I feel like, so I have a 2.5-year-old toddler, and I feel like we are so limited in going out. Like
Oh yeah. Oh, it gets
the
better.
babysitter. Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to, like, I don't want to wish the time away because I love it all, but it's just like asking a babysitter to do a ridiculous bedtime routine is just, it's just
Yes.
like, we can't do that.
No, I mean, at this point, our kids love our babysitter, right? Like they want, they love spending the evening with her. She loves spending the evening with them. It's like a treat for them just as much as it is a treat for us to go out. So, um, it does get much easier.
Awesome. All right. Now your financial personality. Are you good, bad, or neutral with money and finances?
So I feel like there is no good, bad, or neutral. You know, I feel like you, I feel like the people that are the best at money are the folks who have the least of it because you have no choice. Um, and that is not the way folks generally think about these things. They think, oh, you're good with money if you like have a bunch in savings or you like plan for retirement. And um, I think that's, I just have issues with like the moral, uh, I don't even know what it is, but the, like putting morals on how much, and also just the way that like people are valued by how much they make. I mean, you know, um, so I will say, I was making 25 a year for most of my adult life until only just like the last few years, honestly. Um, and was never able to save anything, right? Um, but my parents would give me the $6,000 or whatever the Roth IRA uh, amount was, and they were like, "We're going to give you this. You have to put it in your, retirement account." So, I mean, in because of that, like I feel like, oh, I'm like, I was good with money, but this was not right. It first off was not really my own doing, right? I had that family support. Um, and also, there were years where it's like, oh, you have like some medical crisis that I sewed through my finger once on my sewing machine because I was up till 4 a.m. working on a costume before tech. And I spent my entire design fee going to the emergency room to have my finger x-rayed and the needle removed. And I mean, you know, like you can't be good with money when, you don't have like health insurance that covers anything real and you're being paid so little. Um, so, but I will say, having been poor for so much of my adult life that, you know, um, now that I make significantly more, um, I'm pretty conservative with it because I don't know how long that'll last. And I kind of have that built in, like, you never know kind of a mindset to me. And, at the same time, there was a lot of like catch up expenses that I had to do early on when I started making more money because it was like, oh, right. Like, you know, uh, things I'd put off. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Isabella Bird was on the show months ago, and they had Cabaret, which just closed recently on Broadway, but is still going in the West End, which is wonderful. But she had a tax situation where, like, somebody had just put the comma in the wrong place, and for 7 or 8 years, the IRS kept saying, "You owe us, like, $25,000," or, like, something crazy, and she just kept putting it off, and then the only reason she dealt with it, AKA got better with her money, right? Like, got better financially, was because she had a show that was paying her enough that she could then go hire somebody to go fix the mistake. So it's like, and she said this too, she's like, "It's not that I was better with money, it's just like I got an opportunity." So it's like all those years that it wasn't that I was bad with money, it wasn't my mistake.
Yeah. And just the way that like I mean, I having more money makes everything easier, right? Like I now have health insurance that covers things. So I can go to the doctor and not have to pay, right? It makes no sense. This is not when I need that. I needed that, 6 years ago. Or like, you have the savings account that gets you a higher interest rate. It's like, okay, like I needed that $500 of extra interest, 10 years ago. I don't really need it now, right? And just the way that our whole society is set up to benefit the wealthy is wild and, you know, absolutely on purpose. And I think that, I went through a very pretty sudden shift in, the amount of money I made. And so it was very obvious to me, but I don't know if people who have shifted like that have, I don't know if most people understand like the degree to which, um, there are just more resources available in all of the ways you count resources.
Well, I think of Elon Musk, and it's like everybody fawns over every little thing he says, and it's not because he's brilliant, obviously. I mean, I'm sure he's very smart, but it's like it's because he has billions of dollars that he can say any little thing, and it's backed up by action.
Yes. And the media companies he buys.
And it's like who can just sort of tweet something and then have to spend $44 billion on buying a company just because like they said something? It's like he made a mistake by saying he could buy that company. But he had $44 billion in which he could make it not look like a mistake. Like, and I just saw that, San Francisco is charging speeding tickets, like, on income. So, like, the lower your
Ooh.
income, the lower your ticket is,
Oh,
and the
that's
higher your
exciting.
and it's like, that's so I don't know if it's gonna become California-wide, I think it might.
That's amazing.
But, yeah, I mean, if somebody like Elon Musk got a speeding ticket, it's like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money."
It better be.
Okay. Alright, so Elsa, so we've never met. This is our first time meeting, but I have said your name hundreds of times, maybe even thousands
Oh
of
my
times.
gosh.
And it's because back circa 2020, or you can tell us more about it, but you started this Google Sheet that was all the states in the United States, all the big theater places, and people could anonymously submit. I was a designer at this theater. This is how much I paid. This is what the resources were. Would I go back? Was it a good experience? What is the artistic staff at that theater making in relation to what they're paying for these designers? And what's the budget of the theater? So you put this big sheet together, and I have referenced it so many times or shared it with so many people because it's so much information in one document that is really easy to look at. And so you can just go, like, for example, Missouri, you can click on the Missouri tab, and there's not much theater going on in Missouri, I must admit. So all 10 of the theaters have information about what their artists are getting paid. So first off, Elsa, thank you for putting that document
Sure.
together.
Mhm.
And then can you tell us about it and why you started it, and then maybe explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so, I think I started it 2018 or something, but, just to back up a little bit, in 2016, I wrote a call for equal support in theatrical design, for HowlRound, which, talked about, how costume designers are, not given the same technical support as other design areas, and so, we're doing essentially twice or 3 times the amount of work. Um, and at the time I wrote that, I thought we were doing, twice the amount of work for the same fee, not knowing that I was often being paid less than other designers that I was working with, because I think at some, companies I worked with, I talked to folks and I knew that we were all being paid the same, and I just kind of assumed that was how it was everywhere without talking to folks. Um, but that essay came out and it went, kind of viral in the costume design community, and it got a lot of conversations started, and, through that, I discovered that I was, being paid less very frequently. Often, I mean, uh, I think there was at least one show where I was paid, 10% of what another designer was being paid for that show. So fairly significant. And so from that, the activism grew from labor parity to pay parity. And looking at it, uh, I try to be strategic in the activism and, have a long-term end goal and then have tactics, along the way. And so the first tactic was just get people to talk about it, right? Like people were very worried about talking about pay publicly. And so I thought, a few other folks had put together similar pay transparency sheets for other aspects of the arts. Um, and that doing one for designers would be a helpful tool, at least to get people talking about it more. And so that was really the main goal. And I wasn't really sure how many people would actually submit, but I knew that it would get people to talk about it, which would be helpful. Um, and so it started just Chicago, and just like, what theater did you work at? What, area of design did you work in? And then what did you get paid? And then from there, as it got used more, I started adding other aspects to it. I think I always had the gender demographic and maybe racial demographic in there, but started adding space for notes if people wanted to put that. Started adding in my own research on organizational budget size and executive pay for the year of the design to give it some context. Um, and then obviously, added in all the state tabs as people started adding in their information in other regions. Um, and one thing that I have tried to push back on is that, I don't know, what theater space you're designing in, whether it's part of the main stage thing or, the theater for young people series. I think it's helpful to know who's in the union and who's not, but I don't think that the non-union workers should get paid less. I feel like we need to be paid the same as union workers are. And I would think that union workers would want that too, as far as raising all boats. So, um, yeah, and, I think it was used pretty heavily pre-pandemic, and then, everybody stopped working, and it kind of, stopped getting used as much. But I'm glad that it's helpful, and I will continue to update it if other folks wanna drop in information and keep adding to it. I'm happy to keep, keep it updated.
All right, thank you for saying that because I have not submitted any of my pay. And part of the reason, and the reason why I said 2020 is because a lot of that's when like the last entries are a lot of the time. Now that's not entirely true. There's entries from like 2024. So there are some that are certainly more modern, but I haven't put any of mine in because I've been like, well, I don't know if Elsa's really updating it. But now you've said you are.
Yeah, and I think the historical data is fascinating. I think I've put all of my contracts, that I've ever done that I have record of, right, in there because I think it helps to know, what were people making in 2012 at this theater? And has it changed at all? I mean, there is, sometimes it doesn't change in the way you think it should, and that is a conversation to have when you're negotiating a new contract. Say, "Hey, this is what you were paying 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Um, we're living in a different time." So I do think it's helpful for that. And I hope that people use it as a negotiation tool to see, what other folks are making.
Yeah. And we've said it already in this conversation. You sort of said like I've made 500 or some amount of money like 10 years ago. I'm sure it's changed, or has it changed?
Yeah, right, right.
On your resource, it is things have not changed. Like we had the 2020 and this whole idea of like wage equity, and things have gotten better. They certainly have not gotten worse, but the designer pay to me has not changed at so many
No,
theaters.
since the 80s. I mean, literally since the 80s, it has not significantly changed.
Well, I saw a TikTok of or a reel of I don't know, some podcaster, and he was talking about Broadway musicals, how they're more expensive, and they used the example of Something Rotten, which was this huge cast, huge musical in 2017, and it cost 14 million. And then they compared it to Death Becomes Her, which is a similar size, similar cast, and it cost $32 million. And they're saying, Broadway, the costs have gone up 2 times, but the union rates haven't gone up 2 times. Like, the designer pay hasn't gone up double. So, like, there's all these costs that are inflationary and otherworldly, but the designers still are not. I mean, I'm just saying it's the pay is not what we think it should be and or what it should be.
No, not at all. And I think, especially because we work as independent contractors so much. Like, there really is no minimum rate, right? There's no minimum hourly wage that people have to adhere to. And so it makes it really easy to balance the budget on individual artists, which is a terrible thing, right? And, in some ways, as a system, it makes sense. You have rent, that's a fixed cost. You have, the cost of paint, right? Fixed cost. Um, and so the only unfixed cost is your independent contractors, which is just a terrible spot to be in. And it makes it our job essentially to make sure that we are not a cost that can be, balanced on, that we at least have some kind of, just collective agreement to make ourselves a fixed cost that is at least, a livable wage, if not, thriving and able to, save.
Yeah. Well, and you see, so like I did a gig here in St. Louis for 1480, 1460. And you mentioned like, well, I guess that's the going rate for Missouri, for St. Louis, like for what this is worth on the open market. Because if I don't do the job, somebody else is going to do the job at that same pay rate. And I think there's some truth to that. But also, I don't know how we get like, I mean, other than not doing the gig, I don't know how to get the rates up or like from something like that. Like, because it's like for 1480, I might not do it. A bunch of other people might do it, but lighting for other people could just be lights up, lights down. So like it can happen whether I take the gig or not. Anyway, this is a personal issue that I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think too that, if the pay is not going to shift, we can shift the amount of work we're willing to do for that pay. And that essentially shifts the hourly equivalent rate for us. And so, if you get offered that 1480 job, um, you might be like, okay, this is the number of hours that you get for my time, right? We all know what a minimum wages. You can look up your living wage in your area. And, I've done shows where I calculated it out and I got paid like $2.15 an hour, right? I mean, it's just like the amount of work that I was willing to do is not good, right? It's just not good. Um, and so, if you can say like, hey, this is what you're buying of me, you're expecting this amount of tech time, I assume, yes? And so that only gives me this, which is gonna reduce, the grandeur of how many lighting cues you have. And, um, I think that that is a useful tactic that we can do to start shifting how much people are willing to spend on design. And also, frees us up as artists to hopefully take other gigs or find other work that helps support us. Um, and I think having the conversation about 14, $100 sounds like a good amount, right? And then you're like, you know, this is 2 months of work, right? Is that what we all expect? Is that what you're making across the table for me? Like, I mean, I think it's so easy when it's just a flat number to not really think about the amount of time and labor that goes into it, and also like personal expertise. And I think having those conversations is very important. And even if it doesn't like move the needle in that one job, it will make the negotiation easier for the next person. And I think there's a lot we can do that way.
Yeah. This is like a tangent, but there's another theater here in St. Louis, and now that I'm teaching, I get to talk to other designers. And so there was a sound designer and a lighting designer at some theater that was not. I've never worked there, so I don't know how organized they are, but I don't think they're the most organized. But they tried to add like an 8-hour tech or like 8 extra hours to tech, and the designers just said no.
Yeah, right.
And I was like,
Yeah.
that is so good. I mean, part of it, they were like, well, we're all working on this other show, so we just physically cannot be there. But also just like, you can't just do that. And the show went on without those 8 extra hours of tech. Like it was fine. But it was only because 2 or 3 people just said no. We're putting our foot down.
Yeah. And, they might not try that next time, right? And it'll make it so much easier for the next, crew to say no too. So it's important.
Exactly. All right, Elsa. So aside from that theatrical pay index that you have, what is the other advocacy work that you're doing around equity and pay?
Yeah. So back to think about the strategy and the end goal, the first goal was get people personally to talk about their pay, right? And so that was the pay transparency document. The next kind of tactic in that series was getting pay transparency requirements on all the national job boards for theater in the US. And so on our teamed up with Costume Professionals for Wage Equity, which is a really wonderful org. And I know you've had folks, I think you had Elizabeth Whistler on.
Yeah, Elizabeth and Christina Pasquale.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, they're both incredible people to work with. So essentially, the 8 of us created a few campaigns around pay transparency to get job boards to, make that a required field rather than being able to say, based on experience or, industry, above industry standard, whatever that means. Um, and so we ran those campaigns kind of back to back during the pandemic, 2020 to 2022 or so. And now pretty much every theater industry job site in the US requires pay to be listed. Um, and the goal of that obviously was to make it visible to people as they were applying. It wastes everybody's time less, right? If you can't afford to take a job, you won't apply. You won't waste the person's time who's interviewing you. Um, but then also to kind of show the low rates and try to nudge things upward from there. So that was kind of that tactic. And I've also been working on non-theater but arts industry job boards in Chicago. So nearly all of them in Chicago also require pay. Um, and I think if folks are wanting to do that in their city, I would love to talk to them. Um, and then I did during the pandemic when everyone was online, I reached out to a bunch of theater companies in Chicago, like over 100, to see if they'd have a conversation with me about pay equity. And really, the goal of it was just to get people thinking about it. But through that process, I interviewed leaders from 50 companies, the multi-million dollar company budgets to, the $10,000 budgets, and asked them what did they think pay equity was, what would motivate them to pay equitably, what tools they needed, and what barriers they felt to equitable pay within their company. And through that, learned that people really didn't understand what pay equity was, which is compensating workers without bias, right? Um, People had varying ideas about what the topic meant and what would make it right. And then people were pretty straightforward about what would motivate them and what tools they needed. And so the pay equity standards came out of those conversations. Um, and it was really set up to give people a toolkit so that if they wanted to make changes in their company, they would have kind of a roadmap of tactics that weren't prescriptive because every organization is formatted differently. They have different needs, different staff structures, different budget sizes. But the tool's designed as a checklist so that folks can make individual changes. Even if they're not making all the changes to get certified, they're still making movement in the right direction. But then there is a certification aspect, kind of like the organic fair trade food label, so that hopefully people will be able to decide with their, pocketbooks when they go to see theater if they want to, support equitably made art. Funders can use it to fund, and then obviously workers can use it to decide where they want to work. So that's kind of the goal of that. And then I also talked to foundations about role they play in all of this as far as asking questions about pay equity within their grant forms. And at least in Chicago, several funders have added questions to their applications that ask about, um, unpaid internships or the highest paid hourly equivalent versus the lowest paid hourly equivalent worker, just to kind of see where their money is going and support organizations who are trying to pay more equitably a little bit more.
The pay, like USDA grade beef, whatever, that stamp, is that in use? That's like a future goal, or is that
It's
actually
in use,
now?
yeah. So there are 3 companies right now that are certified. To certify, you have to essentially check off every single task on the pay equity standards list, and then submit some documentation that kind of shows that. Some of it is, training your board on what the living wage is in your area and what you're paying your artists. And so, the documentation would be minutes from that board meeting to show that you discussed that. Um, some of it is, we ask that if you work with union artists, that you pay the non-union artists the same rate. And I've had some organizations that have started doing that it's worked out really positively for. It's just a good feeling when you're going to work and you're all working together. That so so yeah, there are 3 organizations that are certified right now, but over 100 arts organizations across the country are using the pay equity standards. And it started just for theater companies, and it was designed that way. And then I think in 2024, maybe was the first year that we opened it up to any arts nonprofit. So there are non-theater companies, arts nonprofits that are using it. And there are some kind of social issue nonprofits that use parts of it also. It is designed for the art space, but there are some in San Francisco and California area that use it also.
Okay, so what is it called? Is it called pay equity standards?
Yep, the pay equity standards.
How do I know? Like, is it important that I, like, as a consumer, would know that? Like, could I look for that stamp anywhere? You know what I mean? Like, or is it more for the organization itself? Like, if I took a job with this company, would I go look and be like, "Oh, well, they have the pay equity standards. That means I'm feeling good about working here." Like, would I do that? Or like, how can I know that it's happening?
A yes and to all of that. So there are only 3 companies like fully certified right now, right? So and those companies tend to I think, I've seen it in the website footer or on the back of the program book, and it is I think there's a lot of work to be done to have it become a recognizable symbol, but that is the hope that at some point, it's like that organic food label where you kind of know that the workers aren't steeped in pesticides when they're harvesting those foods, and so you want to buy that or whatever. And I do know that folks talk about in their grant applications, even if they're using only a portion, they're not fully certified. So I, it's a tool. I'm happy for folks to use it in whatever way feels good for them. If they, want to put it on every outward facing public thing, great. If they only want to use it to, you know, fundraise or attract workers, that's fine too. The whole point is movement forward. And, I'm also happy for the, 100-ish orgs that are using it in part. Like that is really good movement forward too. I know certification is not easy. You have to commit to things. There's a high bar for a reason. And if that doesn't feel like the right time, doing anything better than you were previously doing is good by me.
Because I'm always trying to figure out, like, how do I have the conversations with, for example, this company that pays 1480. Is it possible that they could get certified? Like, I could say, "Hey, check this out. Would you guys do this?" And they go through this long process and get certified. It is possible that at the end of it, they could still pay 1480, right? Because they would at least be transparent about it, et cetera, all that.
Yes. And, it would be, equitable between what they're paying to other people. Um, and yeah, I mean, at some point, the pay equity standards, and we are not at that point yet, but will shift upwards so that there are living wage requirements, which would, I think, make that 1480 not certifiable. But we're not there yet. I mean, it is, I'm not much of an incrementalist, but there are times where it's useful as a organizing tactic, and so that is, where we're at right now is, and I think too, it is completely fine for a group of friends to get together and make art and not get paid, right? If nobody's making money on it, that is fine. There's pay equity in that too, right? And I have absolutely no problem with people deciding to do that with their time. I think the issue really comes in when someone is making money and when it is, inequitably spread between people. And, we are all human. There is very little way to get around bias and our internal ableism and racism and sexism. Um, and so having a system that kind of puts that in check for you is very helpful, even if you have the best intentions. Um, and so the pay equity standards uses transparency as kind of like one column, accountability and working conditions as the two other columns. And so the idea is that that accountability column will make space for folks to be like, hey, you're paying me 1480. I know you're certified by the pay equity standards, but this is what you're asking me to do. And it doesn't feel equitable because of these things. What can we do? Either reducing the hours, increasing the pay, shifting workload to somebody else who has, is still equitable within that system. But that accountability column is really important to the system.
Yeah. And also, I just want to throw this out there that the organization that paid me 1480, I think they're a wonderful organization. I really do like them. My only, issues with it is one, it's not a livable wage, but they, one, all the designers are getting paid the same, so it's not unequal in that way. I did reduce my hours by several days on site. And then the other thing I think that bothers me is that every single person involved is a professor or like they all have day jobs, and so which is cool, but it's like, but you're not able to get what I would call like professional freelancers in to do this work because the people have to have a day job. So then I just feel like as an organization, they're limiting themselves, or they're not becoming a big player that they could. Anyway, so this is, but the organization is wonderful.
Yeah. And just the way we rely on, I mean, almost all of the, full-time designers, full-time in quotes, designers that are able to make it past like the age of 35, right? Are teachers. And the way that the system relies on that being the job that maintains the system. And, that requires a whole slew of young people to come into it, right? As, getting those degrees and supporting the work of that professor so they can be a professional. And it feels very much like a pyramid scheme to me. And it feels very disingenuous to the young people. And I feel I have never wanted to be a professor. I'm married to a professor, but not in the arts. But I have just never been willing to teach because I feel like it's just, it's deeply problematic that this is how the industry supports itself and then presents itself to the incoming generation of artists.
Yeah. We had Jane Cox, who is in academia, but also a Broadway designer. And she mentioned that when she was in school, she was like looking at her professors as lighting designers. And then she said as she got older and now she's like, oh, but they were actually professors. So they identified as lighting
Yes.
designers because that's the story the industry says. But they were actually
Hmm.
their steady paycheck was coming from being a teacher. And I also have problems with being a teacher as I am with a professor.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I with my students, I don't tell this to the other faculty members unless they listen to this, and then they're going to know now.
Sure, it's
But
out.
but in my mentor meetings, I encourage my students to not be designers. In like that, I just say, look, here's the deal. I want everybody to be a designer, but here's how you can make more money. And and it's easier and you can do it and also do the designing on the side. But I would rather you lead with the other thing, design on the side. If the design takes off, wonderful. But don't like lead with the design because financially
Yeah.
you're going to be better off. So my students so far have been very receptive to that encouragement. And I think I'm setting them up for success by encouraging them not to get stuck into this design identity, which too much information here. I feel like I have this design identity and it worked out in my life that I was able to move to Missouri and then get the one lighting job that opened up. And so now I can keep my lighting designer identity, even though really I'm a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I have several thoughts about this, but back to like the stories we tell ourselves to maintain the system, right? Like, you know, we for some reason need outside voices to tell us that we are an artist, right? That we've made it. And um, having a part-time job or a day job that allows you to do art, outside of that space somehow does not fit that story well. Like, it's not a professional artist. That's not somebody who's made it. And it's so ridiculous that we do that to ourselves because it makes us very easy to exploit. I do think that the identity as a designer is very important. I definitely count myself still as a costume designer. And I think that the process of design, whether it's lighting or costuming or activism, are all very similar. And so whatever I do, even in my day job, is rooted in costume design and the process that I went through as a designer. And so there's a writer whose name I'm not going to remember, and I don't know if they have their book. It's at my other office. I can't remember her name, but she does like data research about the arts now. And she wrote, I think it was like the intro to one of her books. And she was like, I'm always a lighting designer. That is who I am.
Linda Essig.
There you go. Thank you. I love the way she wrote about that because it's what I feel too. And I've always felt a little ridiculous feeling like a costume designer still when I haven't designed something since 2019. But it is so deeply embedded in everything I do that, I can see you feeling the same way maybe.
100%. Yeah, I was immediately thinking of Linda Essig because she's the provost at Baruch College now. I don't even know what a provost does, and I'm in academia, but I just know that it's not lighting design.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And she has written so many books, and she's definitely written books on lighting, which are now like, oh, this is gonna be terrible to me, but like 40 years old. Like these are like they've been around, and she hasn't designed for over 20 years, and yet she still has that identity because like once you are that and you can't lose that identity. You're not kicked out of the club.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
Um,
process is so similar.
yeah. And then also I'm like, I was stay-at-home dad for a while. Now I'm back into academia. So I'm like, feel like I've returned as a lighting designer. But like for the last couple of years, I have been designing very, very little. And yet I still say like, if I have to introduce myself, oh, I'm a lighting designer. I will say we had a producer named Richard Winkler who was on the show and he's designed Broadway shows, so many things. But he now doesn't consider himself a lighting designer. And he's the only person. That being said, he can talk lighting like all over and he loves light and he loves talking to lighting designers. But he's the only person I've ever met that is like, oh, that's my career that I put behind me. And now I'm a producer, not a lighting designer.
Interesting. I wonder if that's because it's still in the arts, if that's feels, I don't know. Yeah. Interesting.
And or maybe he wants people to invest in his shows. And so leading with producer is probably a good
It's a
thing.
good tactic.
Okay, I wanted to say, so you were mentioning how many job boards, like all the theater job boards in the USA now include pay as like a required part
The
of
major ones. Mm-hmm.
the posting, the major ones. I assume, and you had said reach out to me if you want if you want help like getting other job boards or other places to sort of like post the pay. Um, I assume that you got those job boards to do that just by hounding them, by just saying, "Hey, please include this."
Yeah, some of them it was the tactic was email them first, ask nicely, right? Be like, here's the data, here's why you should do this, here's who else has, please make the change. And we give them a timeline, right? Like within the next 30 days or something like that. And with the semi threat being that at the end of the 30 days, if they hadn't responded, hadn't made the change, that we would launch a public campaign for it. And so, I think it was, there were some job boards that made the change. There was one that made the change within 20 minutes of receiving our email. They were like, thank you. We've seen you do this to other job boards. We want to make the change. It's done, right? It's a very small tech thing on the back end to require the field. And then there were, other job boards that didn't respond. And we would do a open letter that people could sign on to, calling for the change as a way to, get public buy-in and then collect quotes about how this would impact them positively. And then we'd use those quotes anonymously within the social media campaign to, tag the job board. I think the Playbill campaign ran for 21 days or something like this. And then we did a fair amount of press. I really like using PR for this kind of thing. And then, various people would post on their social media accounts, in the comments section asking for it so that it kind of got more public attention. Um, and then what my favorite little anecdote from the Playbill campaign was they would just like not respond to us. It was, weeks and weeks of this. And so I ended up finding one of the owners of Playbill's personal email address on a horse racing website because he has racehorses. And so I sent him the email. Like, I was like, hey, here's what's going on. We're serious about this. Can you make the change? And, a few days after that, they responded and they made the change.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. And actually, I'm glad we were talking about the job boards because when I go and talk to classes, I will mention like a place that you can find jobs is playbill.com or offstagejobs.com. And there's like this thing where maybe this is just my experience, but it's like other designers always say, like real designers, whatever that means, professional designers, they always say, oh, you can't get jobs from there, or like those aren't good jobs or something. But I disagree. Like I have gotten
Mhm.
jobs from those
Oh, yeah.
words. I wish people would stop saying that they don't have work on them because they do. Not to mention, any job is like a gateway job because it's like once you do something with the company or the people, you then have expanded your network and can go on. So I'm glad that you guys have done that work for the job boards.
Well, and offstage jobs they made that change way in advance of anybody else. Like they just decided to do that right before we even started our campaign. So definitely, good feelings about them. Yeah, I mean, I think another issue is just that so many jobs in theater are just offered to internal networks, and uh, there's all kinds of inequity in that system too, which is, I think eventually maybe another phase of this work is pointing out that, you should post every lighting design and every costume design job that you are hiring for. And, um, I think it's just, again, in that, talent is more common than opportunity thing, there's just all kinds of space for bias and inequity if we're only hiring, our friends or the people in our network or folks we've already worked with. Um, and, I obviously understand that art requires a certain level of, you know, uh, collaboration and shared vision and style and all of that. But if you're not even asking or looking at anybody else, it's not great.
Yeah, and not for me to enable that system to continue.
Oh, I mean,
But
I did too. I think we all have, right?
yeah, but I totally understand, like, my mindset has always been I'm always as a designer, I'm always hired by the director, or I'm hired by a fellow designer, or, like, they're the one that puts me in touch. And so it's like for any theater show, we are only hiring 5 designers. So the artistic director's like, "Well, I know these people already." So I can understand why they just get that. And then, also, like, theaters that have seasons and the production designers, one, depending on the theater, like, those designers are already set, sort of like if they're working with other companies, or they only need, like, 5 per show. So it's not like they need that many people. And so the work of going and posting that job, I understand that legwork not being something that people wanna do because they don't need to.
Totally. Yeah.
But that being said, I have seen plenty of situations where, like, I always hear this from the directors usually, where they're like, "Oh, I got stuck with this designer because the theater gave me the designer," or whatever. So I do know that there's plenty of situations in which the designer, I don't know, gets hired by, like, the theater company and not the director. And so that being said, I know of enough situations like that where it would be worthwhile to, like, get other people access to those jobs.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of cold, contacting people in whatever form that is. I mean, that's when I moved to Chicago, that's what I did. I sent, info about my portfolio to, like, 75 companies, and I got a lot of work that way. And I think, you know, just reaching out to people who are doing cool work is super important. And, you know, the job boards are great, but also, just, trying to forge those connections on your own too can be really helpful.
Yeah. All right, Elsa, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to point out you had mentioned like your parents giving you $6,000 to put in a Roth IRA. So I love that because that is like the number one thing I encourage people to do, which is open a Roth IRA because it is so beneficial. And now I love that story because I want to say like, yeah, parents or grandparents, if you for whatever reason you want to do something nice, like give your child $6,000 to put in their Roth IRA every year. Or I think it's $7,000 now that you can put
I
in.
think it is now,
Um,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah. So, but whatever that number is, like, give it to them because the power of the Roth IRA and compounding interest is so great and wonderful that, like, what better use, like, than to do that? So, anyway, I just love that your parents did that, and I'm like hashtag goals for my child when they get to be 18.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like, my personal privilege is fairly limited, but I definitely, have it in that way, and, not everybody does, and there's a lot of, artists because we don't talk about these things and the help we get or the help we don't get, that, it makes it, we're not all playing the same game at all, even though we're working the same field. And it can come in many different forms, but I think it's like good to talk about it and not feel weird about it when you're, you know,
Yeah, I think it's so good to address privilege because we all have it. Like, no matter what, even if you don't have privilege, there's like some scale in there that you can find that you have privilege. And it's like, just because you have privilege doesn't mean you can't be a part of these conversations and shouldn't be a part of the conversations. So I do think it's good to address it, not like apologize for it, like, oh, I'm privileged, I'm so sorry. Like, it's not like that.
oh
It's
yeah,
like, no, we all have it it's just manifests in different ways, but we still all have to work for the greater good of the industry.
yeah, and it's a massive reason why I started doing this work because I was like, wait a minute, like I am still deeply struggling, as a white person, and with this, level of family support. This is bonkers that people that don't have those things are also trying to navigate this industry, and, I just feel that responsibility very deeply as far as, you know, both, the work I do that, tacitly enables the system, but also, you know, using that to, change things for the better, hopefully.
What was the word you just say? Tacitly?
Tacitly, yeah, like,
What is that? I'm learning a new word. What does this mean?
Okay. Like
I Googled it, but I spelled it wrong. Oh, wait, it corrected me. Here we go.
okay.
In a way that is understood or implied without being directly stated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
implied. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. All these tacitly said things about finances. Okay, cool. Thank you. I have to go listen back to how you said it and thank you. Um, all right, Elsa. Regarding finances or the business of a career, what advice would you give to somebody starting out? And let's say a costume designer that's starting out in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think, going in eyes wide open about the industry that you're entering in and what it will take of you to be successful is important. I think not getting hung up on, um, looking, being, feeling professional is very important, and, knowing your worth and being able to, feeling like you can speak up for yourself is very important. And I think that people have a lot more power to do those things than they fear they, don't have. So I think try to build that up for yourself as quickly as you can would be good.
I love that thought about know your worth. And I think that's a really big challenge going into the industry because people are like, well, what am I worth? And you only know that by like doing jobs and then you get paid. And then somehow you associate that with like how you're worth. But I want to reference your designer pay resource because if you're a designer starting out, you can go and look at that pay resource and see what other people's worth is. And then know, like, am I doing that same job? So I feel like you can get an answer before if you're not sure what your worth is, like what can you ask for? I think go to that and see what other people are asking for.
Yeah, and looking at living wage data in your area, and I always have to say this, but living wage does not include retirement savings or rainy day savings. So it's a keep on working wage is kind of how I like to describe it. But looking at that, so in your area, and like knowing what your personal budget is too really helps as far as understanding that worth that you can kind of triangulate all those factors to get to something that feels reasonable.
Would you say livable wage is a paycheck to paycheck wage? Is that a fair?
Yeah, I mean, there's no retirement built in there. There's no massive medical issue built in. It is, yeah, it's
It is just how to get paid enough this month to pay all your expenses for this month.
right. Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention the livable wage thing. So Jen Shriver is a really good pay advocate for designers, like, and her associates and stuff. And how she advocates is being very prepared and saying, this is the livable wage, et cetera. So if you're going to ask for a higher fee or something, it doesn't take long. Like you could do this in less than half an hour to look up the livable wage,
Mhm.
compare it, say, look here, this is what I'm trying to get to just to have the livable wage. So you can do that legwork and bring it in because data is data. And that's really the only way you can speak. Like you can't bring emotion into this discussion. It just has to be data driven and the data is semi accessible,
Yeah.
and is reasonable when you put it all out on paper. It's very reasonable. So, so when you're figuring out your worth, bring some
Yes.
data. All right,
Definitely.
Elsa, I am so glad to have met you and I so appreciate you just because I feel like I sort of knew you already because I see your name so much.
Yeah. Same from listening to the podcast. Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode. My only takeaway is a massive amount of respect for and gratitude to Elsa. The work she is doing is thankless and it's making the world a better place. Like the designer pay resource and also getting pay posted in job listings has helped me more than it has helped Elsa. And also, she's just pragmatic about this career. So thank you, Elsa. Now, in the description box of this episode, the only link is Elsa's website. And that's because it's well laid out and it includes everything that we have discussed today. You can find that at artisticfinance.com/194 or elsahiltner.com. we mentioned Roth IRAs. A side note to Elsa's parents, who contributed several years to her Roth IRA, that is an absolutely baller thing that you did for her. So any parents or guardians out there, remember that if you ever have the means and energy to do such a thing, totally do it. Now, for 2026, you can contribute $7,500 to a Roth IRA. During the interview, we said some numbers that were not correct. So in 2026, you can put $7,500 in. So if you are listening to this and you don't have an IRA, wow, this would be a perfect time to start one. And if you're going to, I suggest that you make it a Roth IRA. For tax reasons, look it up for yourself. Now, since 2026 is just getting started, if you want to contribute that entire $7,500 through the year, you have to contribute $625 a month. So get those auto contributions set up and let's make it your goal to fully fund your IRA. Now, if you are feeling behind or you think that you can definitely achieve that goal and you want to save even more, remember that you can contribute to an IRA for last year. And you can do that up until the tax filing deadline of April 15th. So you can open a Roth IRA today and put $7,000 in it for tax year 2025, because in 2025, it was a $7,000 limit to put into a Roth IRA or a regular IRA. But you have until April 15th or whenever you file your taxes in order to contribute for last year. But that's only for those of you who are crazy enough to prioritize retirement to a crazy degree. For everybody else, let's set our sights on $625 a month into our 2026 IRAs and max those out by the end of the year. All right, now before we wrap the episode, let me explain that 6-month gap between episodes. All right, it started with me needing sleep. So usually on Sunday night, that's when I'll finish editing and I'll type up the social media posts, I'll create the website page, and I'll upload the video to YouTube, etc., all that. And actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, you might notice that I'm wearing pajamas right now because I'm recording this in the middle of the night after Theo's been put to bed, and this is when I have peace and time to do this. But actually, come to think of it, if you're only listening and you're not watching this, then I'm wearing a suit and I'm really put together, and this is like the most official podcast that exists in the world. But anyway, one Sunday 6 months ago, I started editing and I just fell asleep. And then I found that sleep was really nice, so I just kept going to sleep and felt that I was feeling better getting more sleep and not editing podcasts. So then I was going to start up again, but I started a teaching job in August. So a couple weeks into that, I then designed lights for Raisin, the musical, here in St. Louis, and that was followed immediately by designing lights for and associate producing the play False Steps, which ran off Broadway in the month of September. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it took all of my energy, both physically and mentally. And so I just kept sleeping instead of editing podcasts. And I also went off social media, and I was just focusing on teaching and raising the toddler. And that's sort of where we are now. So forgive me for not having a particularly good reason, but that is what happened. But we're back. I have 3 interviews ready to go that I recorded in 2025, and those are going to be our next 3 episodes. And then after that, we're going to start with current and fresh interviews. Now, I can't say this enough, but a huge thank you to the Patreon patrons who stuck with me, especially our newest patron who joined the week that I decided to take the unannounced break. So they joined just to 6 months of no new episodes. Now, patrons do have a special podcast feed that has the next 3 unedited interviews already posted. And today's interview was available back in October. So I didn't entirely abandon the patrons, but for the most part, I did. please forgive me. But many, many thanks for staying, because you are affording us to keep the podcast feed and the website, which is good because while we were away, we averaged more than 1,000 downloads a month. So thank you. Now, the dad joke to end the episode. I used to be addicted to soap, but I'm clean now. I guess you could say I took a clean break. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.